The Oodnadatta Track is a land of stories, built up over time and layered one upon another. The track provides a great example of how geography shapes history. The chain of natural springs that stretches from Maree to Oodnadatta and beyond towards the Northern Territory meant that this was a route well travelled by Aboriginal people for thousands of years before the explorer John McDouall Stuart discovered the springs in 1858. Stuart's discovery finally enabled the extension of European enterprise north into the inland, and the springs defined the line of travel and communication that functioned as the only viable route to the north for the best part of a century. Originally known as Hergot Springs, the town of Maree was officially proclaimed in 1883, a year before it attained new status as the head of the Great Northern Railway. Construction of the railway continued on through to Oodnadatta, but Maree remained an important railhead for the transport of cattle, particularly stock brought in by drovers on the track from southwest Queensland. The town has a rich and complex cultural history. People of Aboriginal, Afghan and Anglo-Celtic descent have coexisted in Maree. In 1998, a remarkable and mysterious event occurred not too far outside Maree. Literally overnight, the world's largest piece of land art materialised on a gibbostroon plateau in the Finnis Springs area, about 60 kilometres to the northwest. The image of an Aboriginal warrior over 4 kilometres long was heavily inscribed into the surface of the plateau. The so-called Maree Man instantly became an attraction for tourists taking scenic flights out of Maree. It is still not known who was responsible for the creation of this massive geoglyph. Lyle Oldfield is the third generation of his family to live and work in this part of the world. He operates the Oasis Store and Caravan Park, the base from which scenic flights operate out of Maree throughout the tourist season. We asked Lyle to tell us the Maree Man story.
Well, the fax came, and I never actually took a lot of notice of it, and the following Tuesday the hotel got a fax. They hired the aeroplane, and they went over to look for this Maree Man. So anyhow, they found it, they came back, and they was all raving about it, and I said, I had a fax from that. On the fax it said that 35 miles due west from Maree on the top of a plateau there's this giant carving of an Aboriginal warrior. And it was 4.2 kilometres long and 28 kilometres around it, which made it 7 times bigger than the chalk carvings at Peru. And it's still there. We flew over it this year, and it's just as clear as it was 3 months after it was put there. One of the guys that was here said, I know how that was done. He said it was done with a 10-disc plough, and it was done 16 times. Well, they tell me that's true. I don't know if it is or it isn't. But they actually pegged it inside and outside with bamboo shoots. So the GPSs may have been used, but at the same time, it was pretty clever because he pegged it prior to actually doing it. So whoever it was pretty good. The myth about it now is everyone wants to know who did it, and that's part of the story, is that it's a mystery who actually did do the Maree Man.
Close to Poole Creek, about 30 kilometres up the track from Maree and at the eastern boundary of the Finnis Springs Aboriginal land, you'll notice a well-maintained wire fence running perpendicular to the road. This is the dog fence. Historian Peter Bell has undertaken a comprehensive heritage study of the Oodnadatta Track. We asked Peter to tell us the story of this outback epic.
Well, the dog fence is a remarkable outback monument. This enormous fence that goes for thousands of kilometres right across the continent. When you see it in any one place, it's just an unusually tall and imposing and well-maintained fence, but when you grasp the fact that it goes and goes and goes all the way from the Great Australian Bight to the Darling Downs, it's pretty amazing. Gradually, over about 50 years, this patchwork of fenced areas began to spread across the state. And in 1946, the government brought in the Dog Fence Act and formalised it and created provisions for funding it. Basically the benefited people inside the fence paid a fee which went to maintain the fence along certain station boundaries. And that had the effect of dividing up the outback into sheep country and cattle country. You could graze sheep inside the fence, but outside the fence it had to be cattle. And that division is still recognisable right across South Australia today. Where you can graze sheep is defined by where the dog fence runs.
Like all salt lakes, Lake Eyre is a place where distance often seems to dissolve into an illusory, infinite space. Under certain light conditions, the horizon line disappears and the lake surface seamlessly mirrors the sky. Terry Krieg is well acquainted with the extreme environment of Lake Eyre, having spent 33 gruelling days walking around the lake with noted desert explorer Warren Bonython in 1982. Here, Terry recalls this experience.
The 1982 walk around Lake Eyre was one of those chances of a lifetime. Deserts are difficult places to negotiate. Lake Eyre is a particularly difficult environment. But we had our water and food put in place well before we went, so we spent a month working our way from one food and water cache to the next. And after 33 days and 208 walking hours, we completed a circumambulation of Lake Eyre. Essentially, it was an endurance test, and I might add, it was a major endurance test. It was the hardest 33 days physically I've ever put in my life. Despite all the hard work and the anxieties and fear that, am I going to make this or am I not going to make it, there was this element of exploration and great excitement about it, notwithstanding the fact that your body is hammered to bits and you come back looking like a skeleton, which I did.
The Lake Eyre Basin is a land of extreme conditions. To a large extent, the notion of average rainfall is meaningless. The amount of rainfall is generally very low, and the evaporation rate is very high. But the major defining factor for rainfall over the Lake Eyre Basin is its variability. Really, this is a land of boom and bust, and the ecology of the area has evolved to deal with these dramatic and unpredictable seasonal variations. Pat Katnich has spent 20 years working variously as a tour operator, a pastoralist and a field naturalist in the Lake Eyre region. In that time, she's seen the full scope of extreme climatic and environmental conditions. As Pat explains, in this part of the world, it's all about water.
The rivers, creeks, water systems flowing in the Great Artesian Basin drain into the heart of the basin, which is Lake Eyre. Now, when Lake Eyre fills, and when those river systems that are draining into the lake fill following really high rainfalls, and 1989 was a year in point, you know, we had something like 26 inches in the old scale, and that resulted in flooding of Lake Eyre, of course, and it wasn't long before the birds, in they came from all over the place. And all the river systems flowing into the lake supported bird life, and the pelicans were there in their thousands, as were the stilts, the banded stilts. And of course, this phenomenon doesn't happen very often. Just as the eggs of the fish lie dormant in the lake, in the salt lake, and then suddenly everything comes to life in the water, so the same thing happens on land. And you've got native plants that their seeds are designed in such a way they have very hard outer coverings, and they can remain in an environment for many, many years. just waiting for the right conditions to prevail. Sometimes that's the amount of rainfall, sometimes it's temperature. Each plant type has its own specifications, if you like, and the diversity is astounding. It's often very subtle. In good years, though, you can see Swainsona P, for example, stretching as far as the eye can see. Poached egg daisies. There are numerous varieties of daisies. Some plants are there all the time. You've got the perennials that basically will provide you with a flower or two practically every year, and that's a Frankinia, a little sea heath that grows around the Mountain Springs. You can almost be guaranteed to see.
One of Australia's most isolated towns, William Creek boasts an iconic historic hotel, as well as the world's first solar-powered public telephone. Originally a support and supply station for the Overland Telegraph, William Creek was also a major loading point for cattle transported on the Old Ghan Railway. The town is located in the middle of Anna Creek Station, the world's largest cattle property, and workers from Anna Creek will often be found in William Creek at weekends making some noise at the hotel bar. The William Creek social calendar features a couple of major events that draw big crowds from up and down the track. The William Creek Gymkhana and the William Creek Bronco branding competition provide an unforgettable experience. Similar to Strangways, further down the track, the Peak was a significant site of European settlement during the early years of the Overland Telegraph. The number of stone ruins at the site attests to the scale of the repeater station operations. These buildings included the repeater station itself, as well as the battery room, accommodation buildings for the telegraph operators and linesmen, and horse stables. It's interesting to consider that the Overland Telegraph repeater stations at Strangways and the Peak served an identical function to the solar-powered repeater facilities that boost the fibre optic communications network running alongside the Stuart Highway today. Before and after its life as a telegraph repeater station, the Peak was used as a pastoral homestead. Like Strangways, the Peak site was chosen because there is good permanent water at this location. For the same reason, the area has always been an important traditional site for the Arabunna Aboriginal people. Country traversed by the Oodnadatta track is a land of many natural wonders. Legend has it that Oodnadatta was first known as Angle, in reference to the nearby Angle pole for the Overland Telegraph, but the name of Oodnadatta was officially proclaimed in 1890. Linny and Adam Plater wandered into Oodnadatta in 1975 in the course of an overland hippie adventure. Somehow they've never managed to leave. They established the legendary Pink Roadhouse, an icon of outback hospitality, and became pioneers in the development of tourism on the Oodnadatta track. We asked Linny to tell us the Pink Roadhouse story and to describe some of the changes she's witnessed over the period of her life in Oodnadatta.
When I came to Oodnadatta, I went into the pub at 11 o'clock and said, could I have a cup of tea? And they just held me down, because you don't go into a pub and ask for a cup of tea. And I thought, well, I'm not the only person in Australia who wants a cup of tea at 11 o'clock. So that gave me the idea. I was so naive. I thought, I'm going to open up a cafe and sell cakes and cups of tea. We'll try and survive on that. But that was the idea behind the tucker box. So we decided that we'd turn this little Copper Hill shack into an after-hours cup of tea joint, and we got a jukebox the first jukebox in Oodnadatta, and were able to have the kids come over at night because the children's hostel was out the back and I'd worked over there, and the kids were allowed to come that far in an evening and sit round. I made hamburgers inside and just basic groceries, but the kids sat outside and the jukebox was going, so it was a meeting place. And so that was the beginning of the Roadhouse, the Pink Road.